has a happy ever after. And after this story, there's an after party.
Previously on Dragon Ball Z.
What's in the West Wing? It's forbidden. Oh, God, I can't remember what that was from, but that made me crack up.
Dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow.
Oh, gosh. Well, welcome back to Happy Ever After Party. I'm Sam Logston.
I'm Amanda Pierce.
And when we last left off on Once Upon a Time, the clock finally started moving again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and she crashed into the sign at the end of the last episode.
Motherfucker, we forgot that.
Yeah, Regina made her a drink while they were talking about the state of Henry. Henry?
Henry.
Is the name of the annoying fucking kid?
Yes, and we actually learned in this episode where his name comes from.
Ooh. Origin stories.
Oh, God. This episode definitely got me to laugh a little bit more, and I think it was at this point that I wasn't nearly as annoyed with the name Storybrooke.
Yeah, and I think it was this episode that had Dennis perking up when he was watching it, just kind of casually, because it introduces an actor that he's a big fan of. So that made him very, very happy. He was like, "Woo!"
You're not.
I'm teasing.
You're
teasing
not.
it out.
Okay. All
yeah,
right.
we got to get to that point
Yeah,
first.
we got to. Holy
but
shit.
But yeah, Emma had a drink that Regina made her and then crashed into the Storybrooke sign.
We forgot about that. Sorry, folks.
It's like the last 5 seconds of the episode.
Yeah.
And so she wakes up in jail with a hot jailer, which this is the episode when I recognized him. Do you know who that is?
Are you talking about Chief Graham?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sheriff Graham.
Sheriff Graham. Yes, I do. And
that's motherfucking Jamie Dornan.
That sure is.
That is Christian Grey.
He sure is.
Which explains a lot about his relationship with Regina and why she's into it.
Yep.
I have nothing to say about that other than I realized it this episode, because I was like, he's kind of cute. He's kind of really cute. Who is he? He looks kind of familiar. And Dennis is like, he has kind of a Christian Grey, like that guy from 50 Shades of Grey face. And I'm like,
he does.
And I Google it, and I'm like, that's because it's him.
And you know what? I don't have anything to say about Sheriff Graham yet.
Yeah.
I will later.
I think he's doing fine. Like, I like him as a character. I'd say more than I like Emma, which is gonna be a repeated sentiment, because I don't like Emma and I don't like the kid.
And I've said this before, and I will continue saying it. There's only two reasons why I like Once Upon a Time, and that is Robert Carlyle and Lana Parrilla. And that will be a constant for me. Yeah, well, up until we get into best guy liner in all of guy liner history.
I've seen pictures of him.
Yeah. So, real quick, before we get into spoilers for episode 2, I guess just to very briefly recap what's going on is more flashbacks and more rubbing in the face of why your biological parents are better than your adopted ones.
Yeah, because how dare you choose a child you want to raise?
Yeah. Again, if there were no flashbacks and we were just going by what's happening in the real world, like, so much of this would be wrong. It would be like, because, like, there's certain parts where you kind of get the idea that Emma wants to stay around to see if she needs to call CYF. But if it wasn't for everything else, then you wouldn't need to call the cops on Emma.
No, not really. Aside from the kid running away all the time. But that's not her fault.
No, it's not.
So, if you want to get into an overview, do you want to do it? You want me to do it? I have the wiki pulled up.
Okay, so consider this from here on out a spoiler alert. Amanda, go away with the overview.
So we start out where, at the end of the last episode, Henry got a book and found out about this fairy tale curse from his teacher. Another thing we forgot to mention.
Hold on. Putting a pin in it.
Putting a pin in it. But he got this book from his teacher that explains that they're all fairy tale characters that have forgotten it. And Regina takes it away from him at the end of the last episode, and she comes into his room saying that there are pages missing, and he's like, it's an old book. Of course there are pages missing. And he does the "you're not my mom."
Of course he does. Which he will continue to do throughout the series.
Regina goes to Emma, who is staying at Granny's, and gives her an apple. And they have mild threatening talk, like they do all the time. Oh, and then we get the flashback.
Okay, so...
Prince Charming, after Regina threatens him, throws his sword at him, and she, like, disappears in smoke. And then there's this old guy, he's like, "Do you want a drink, madam?" And she's like, "Do I look like I need a drink?" And then she takes the drink and does not drink it. She just holds it. Because acting.
And says thank you afterwards.
She does say thank you nicely.
Yes.
To this older gentleman with a cummerbund.
I'm just trying to help.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I want her interior designer.
Same.
And then we get the introduction of the magic mirror.
Yes.
Who is the person my husband was very excited to see.
Who I was very excited to see when I first watched this because, and I'm sorry for not having the actor's name.
Carlo Esposito.
Yeah, Carlo Esposito, who was Gus in Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And I love his character so much. I can't really call him the third reason to watch Once Upon a Time, but he's like an honorable mention.
He's not in it enough to really be a reason to watch it, but he's in another episode later on, and he's just always a delight to see. Though it's very weird for him to have just a waspy American accent, as opposed to like a Mexican accent like he had in Breaking Bad. Yeah,
and his natural cadence is so pleasant to listen to that why they're making him talk like such a Poindexter is annoying.
He talks like a nerd.
Yeah.
Like, but she is going to go and get a curse back from her buddy, Maleficent, who I have feelings about, but
I do
the
too.
Sound effect.
We're putting a pin in that.
So she gets her curse back from Maleficent and finds out this curse where there'll be no happy endings, where we ended up where we're at in Storybrooke now. But it doesn't work. She has to sacrifice the heart of her beloved steed, her childhood steed.
Well, here's the thing. She misinterprets it.
Yeah. It doesn't tell you what the curse says. But she says you have to throw in the heart of something beloved or something like that. So, and the curse doesn't work, and she gets laughed at, and she turns the guy into a gnome. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to go through
she turned a gnome into stone.
A gnome into stone.
Yes.
Like, when she turns the gnome into stone, it flashes back to the real world.
And he is a gnome statue
that's
right outside the park.
And it's terrifying.
It is. And, like, there's little things like that about the show that do make me laugh. Mm-hmm. So I appreciated that cut.
So she realizes the curse doesn't work, and she goes back to the person who gave her the curse, Rumpelstiltskin, who we also didn't mention in the first episode.
Well, that's because he wasn't really he wasn't noteworthy talking about really until this episode.
No, he was pretty noteworthy in the first one because he was the one who told Snow and the Prince about the curse to begin with.
That's true.
Their daughter was going to save them.
That's true, but I think it's a little bit, you really need to wait for him.
Yeah, it's a little bit more relevant.
Because if you don't know who Robert Carlyle is, you might have missed it. Yeah. That he was Rumpelstiltskin in the first episode, because you only see him in the real world really quickly.
Yeah, he, like, walks across the street.
Yeah.
But then he gets mad at her, and he's like, why did you sacrifice the heart of a horse? You have to sacrifice the heart of the thing you love the most in the world.
And wouldn't you know it?
That the old man who handed her the drink was
her dad,
her father, Henry, who we later find out she names her adopted son after. So she sacrifices the heart, and it works, basically. And the one important thing from the Rumpelstiltskin scene is he always makes deals. Mm-hmm. And his deal with her is he will tell her what she needs to do for the curse to work, But in this new world she creates, she has to do anything he asks as long as he says please. Which is adorable, and I kind of love it. It's kind of cute.
I do too, and her response was, "You're not going to remember anything." And
he's like, then it won't matter.
Yeah, it's not gonna matter. Which, Regina is not dumb. So how she bought that, you know, whatever. The show needs to have a plot.
Yeah, and long story short, she sacrifices her father. She kills him, and he's like, you don't have to do this to be happy. And she's like, but I want to, so stabby stab, sacrifice my dad.
Now, we also get that brilliant little bit about the curse actually happening in the fairy tale world. Like, and them using the wardrobe again.
Do they use the wardrobe again in this episode?
Yeah, because...
I don't think they did. I don't think they showed it.
Well...
It was all Regina-centric.
I can't remember if it was this one or in the first episode, but there was that whole bit with Prince Charming holding a baby in sword fighting.
Yeah, no, that was the first episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, where he was holding the baby in sword fighting. Yep. With no blood getting on the baby or anywhere, because...
Besides maybe a sword and maybe his shirt later when he's stabbed.
Yeah, it's on his shirt later when he gets stabbed. It's never on a sword. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
We're allowed to forget stuff in the first episode.
Yeah.
So when we see Regina in the real world, she is in her garden picking apples from her tree. And Carlos Esposito comes up to her and says, hey, I got the Mirror, which is the newspaper. Huh? And his name in it is Sidney Glass. Yup. The names just keep on rolling. And he learned about Emma's background, and that's what's in the paper, and it's nothing really noteworthy. Sorry.
You know, besides the fact that she herself was orphaned.
Yeah, I think he does learn that, or she mentioned. I don't remember.
He mentions it briefly.
And basically everything that goes on with it, Emma and Henry, is him just trying to say, it's real, and she's like, not real. Like, for a while, she like plays into his delusion while they're walking down the street to school.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, okay, what do you think? And I'm like, this is not healthy for a
normal adult
child
would have those kind of conversations.
Oh, and she goes to take a bite of the apple she got from Regina, and Henry just throws it.
Stops there.
They're in the middle of the street, and Henry throws it over his shoulder.
Yeah, it's like...
And as I'm watching it, I do the SpongeBob, my leg! Like, that kid just threw an apple over his shoulder in a busy freaking street.
Like, you can't just yeet an apple and not expect it to hit somebody or something.
Yeah, and so she walks him to school because he meets her at the diner with the hot Little Red Riding Hood. And
but they didn't tell us that. They didn't expressly tell the audience
it's
the 1-to-1 ratio of... Are you sure
it's called
that Granny
Grannies.
And Ruby are Granny and Little Red Riding Hood?
Yes, I'm positive.
Okay.
I am so sure that...
The show has gaslit me to think I'm stupid, so I have to double check with you.
The show is not wrong sometimes. But she tells Mary Margaret Blanchard, get it? Blanchard. Like white, like Snow White, that Henry thinks she's Snow White, and Snow White, Mary, asks her, well, who does he think you are? And she goes, oh, I'm not in the book. And Henry gives her the pages he had ripped out of the book explaining who Emma is. Mm-hmm. So Emma goes to Jiminy Cricket, Archie. The kid's
I can't remember his last
therapist.
name. Yeah.
And gets the notes from the therapist.
Yeah, just let's dwell on this for a second.
I'm like,
Jiminy Cricket is a therapist.
And he just, like, gives her his mental health files, like, with all of his information in it.
But why does he do that, Amanda?
Well, it upset me for a period of time, and then I had to pause the show to make dinner, and I'm going, why the hell would he violate doctor-patient confidentiality and give this strange woman all of this kid's file? Okay, he's working for Regina.
Well, no, not necessarily that he's working for
He's
Regina.
being blackmailed by Regina?
No, she called him and told him that would happen. And the thing about this that's the hardest to buy into is that, well, again, everybody just kind of like basically apparated into Storybrooke, Maine. And the town memory, because Mary Margaret says this over and over again. Oh, it's been like this for as long as I can remember. He's been in a coma for as long as I can remember. Regina's been mayor as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
Things like that over and over again. And I just find it really hard, even though like they're all kind of brainwashed, that 28 years go by and nobody nobody challenges Regina, or she doesn't even try to put on like the facade of stepping down as mayor.
I think it's part of the curse, because they do say like she's been mayor for as long as they can remember, but it's also obvious, and they do mention it, that everyone is scared of both Regina and Mr. Gold, Rumpelstiltskin.
Yes, they say that a lot,
and it's clear through some of the actually more subtle acting that they are like scared to stand up to her. So people kind of just accept the status quo there and kind of just live in a haze, and I think that is also mentioned day to day. So they're just kind of like in a haze, just kind of living life.
Well, not to necessarily spoil a future episode, but they kind of tap into the effects of the curse a little bit more. Like, as of right now, it's a little bit frustrating and hard to buy into. And because it takes so long to kind of go into that part of the curse, I find it annoying. But at some point, they do actually address it.
Oh, the other thing they mention at this point, too, is Operation Cobra.
Oh, fuck that. I don't care.
Which is the code name Henry gives to helping these people remember their past. But Emma is Jiminy Cricket. I'm gonna call him fucking Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah, he's Jiminy Cricket.
Calls Regina and says, "You were right, she stopped by here." So Emma's reading Henry's files on her bed in the hotel room, the bed and breakfast room.
And Sheriff Gray comes in.
And Daddy Gray comes in. And says, Archie called and said that you broke in, threatened him, and stole his files. So Regina's framing her. She gets arrested. Mary comes in and bails her out with Henry.
Because I trust you.
Because she trusts
Oh,
her.
that horrible line delivery, too. Why did you do this? Because I trust you.
Yeah,
I think it's like, yeah, God, this fucking show.
And then Emma goes back to her room after a while. Oh, does she cut down the tree yet?
She does in this one, yes.
Oh, yeah. Regina hears a noise outside of her office, and it's Emma cutting down her tree with a chainsaw, and I'm like, that's destruction of private property.
She doesn't cut it down. She only cuts off one limb. And
but that's still destruction of property.
It's destruction of property.
And you're getting arrested again.
It's mentioned as such. And it's at this part where Mr. Gold goes to Regina.
Is it then?
Yes, it is. Because she's picking up the apples from her tree.
Yeah. Okay.
And Mr. Gold kind of goes up to her and, is talking about Emma being into town and, thank goodness that your tree isn't completely destroyed, and Regina being very self-assured and stuff like that. And, Mr. Gold might be asking for a favor in order to really get rid of Emma.
Oh, and he also drops the hint that he is the one that she specifically asked for Henry to adopt. It's a little bit better now because she specifically targeted Emma's son. Emma gets kicked out of Granny's B&B because they have no felons.
After being called by Regina, it's not even hinted at. She's just like, Regina called you guys, didn't she? And she's like, yeah, just give me my key back.
It was either from Regina or from the newspaper.
Let me guess, you just got a call to remind.
And she goes out to her car and they put a boot on her car. So now she can't leave. Oh. Flashback. We already did all the flashbacks.
Yeah, we did the flashbacks and we're going through most of the episode.
Henry goes to Archie for therapy and
Emma
he
crashes
gets mad.
therapy.
I forget why.
Oh, because you know how whenever Emma cut down the tree?
Yeah.
She was like, your move. Regina invites her over to the house around the time that Henry comes home from school.
Her.
She gets Emma to say that believing in the fairy tales are crazy. Henry hears it, and Regina's like, okay, your move.
Okay. So,
and then Emma crashes his therapy session.
Yeah, and then she's
which, you know,
like,
you can do.
I believe you, but we gotta burn the pages of this book so Regina will never find them. Mm-hmm. So she burns the pages of the book, and they gotta trick her into thinking that neither Henry nor Emma believe in the fairy tale thing anymore, which kind of goes nowhere. Next episode, it's still pretty obvious he believes in the fairy tales.
Yeah, or at the very least, he just doesn't have a believable relationship with his mother. And I don't mean that in the sense of, like, I don't buy that Regina has been a mother figure to him. No, I mean, like, I don't buy their acting together. I don't buy their dialogue.
Emma and Henry.
Emma and Henry's, or Regina and Henry's. And admittedly, the kid, he's supposed to be 10. He might be like 11 or 12 in real life, but who knows?
I honestly, in a lot of scenes, believe that Regina is a mother who is trying her best to control, or not control, but to, like, do her best with her awful, awful son. I believe it in a lot of scenes, especially when she's like, Henry, I am your mother.
Yeah.
And there's another episode coming up here that I have seen where I also do very much believe it. That she actually has feelings for this kid.
Oh yeah, no, that is painfully obvious, but the show keeps on questioning it.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes with the whole, like, you know, like, the whole holding the audience's hand for every single character explanation, and the book. Okay. I'm unpinning the book.
Okay.
I hate it. I hate the book, and I understand why they have it, and I'm not saying that, like, to not have any kind of book wouldn't work, but it's such a dumb device.
Yeah, I think
it is
not
so dumb. It is
bright.
Unnecessary.
And what kind of book is it? Because it's not a children's book. It has, like, four columns of text.
And it's, like, size 0.5.
It's like 8-point font.
And hideous drawings.
Yeah, and really ugly drawings where a lot of characters' faces are obscured and just bad artwork.
And get dissolved into shitty green screen effects.
Oh my god. Okay, hold on. Take a pin out of it. Maleficent.
Okay. They done her dirty.
Oh, Jesus.
Now that before we actually tear into this character, I will say this. Their interaction with each other was brief, but I could honestly just watch, like, an hour of Regina and Maleficent bitching at each other. Mm-hmm. That would make for far more entertaining television.
The best part of the scene was the little black unicorn.
Little unicorn. Maleficent's black unicorn. Why is she blonde?
I have more issues than the fact that she's blonde, because Dennis...
Her whole look.
Dennis comes in and says, why is Suzanne Summers playing Maleficent?
Yes.
And I'm like, yep. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Why?
And then I see, while I'm watching this episode, take a journey with me.
Yes.
To my first time watching this episode.
We're going to step back in Amandalation land.
The evil queen goes and visits her friend, who they do not mention by name until quite into this scene.
Like about a good minute and a half.
They're sitting in front of the fire, and then there is this blonde Suzanne Somers looking bitch. And she sits down, and they're talking all catty. And I kind of see the staff, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But she has on her head this purple, bedazzled thing. And I'm like, oh, bitch, this better not be Maleficent.
It's shaped like the horns.
She looks like a low-rent drag queen jester.
Do you ever see Scrooged?
Yes.
She looked like the ghost of Christmas Present that Carol Kane played.
Oh my god. Like, what
it was
is
awful.
It with these horns and the character design? Like, you would think Maleficent, black slick hair, if anything. Or don't show her hair like they did in the original cartoon, Disney.
But you had the rights to it. And Angelina Jolie did not play this character yet. So you had the opportunity to do it, Disney.
I mean, they couldn't afford Angelina Jolie, but there's this woman...
No, I'm just talking about the outfit.
There's this woman who's a Carol Kane-looking motherfucker that, like, has blonde, curly, kinky hair and a stupid jester hat and, like, a lavender-colored outfit.
She looked more like Glinda than she did Maleficent.
She looked like a drunk drag queen jester, but a bad one.
Yes.
Like, the lowest rent one.
Oh my gosh.
It was bad. And the little unicorn horse was adorable in my favorite part of the scene. And the special effects of this scene were garbage.
Most of Once Upon a Time's
the metal effects where, because she, like, binds her against the wall and she's like, don't do this, evil queen. Blah, 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 blah. And she's just, like, monologuing tied by CGI effects. And I'm not here for it. I'm not here for this character choice. And I know they do the Wicked Witch of the West way later on. And guys, I've seen the pictures. I
didn't make it that far.
I haven't seen the actress, like, acting, but I've seen the pictures, and my god.
Now,
you're in for some shit.
I saw the series. I've seen a lot of characters, but I actually don't remember the first couple of episodes of the first season that well. I thought that she was another character who shows up later, Maleficent.
Oh, does she not come back?
No, like, her on-screen presence reminds me of another character.
Okay.
That is in, like, later episodes.
Alright.
I don't even know if the person who I'm thinking of is even in this season.
Have you watched past this season?
Yes.
Okay.
I got up to Neverland.
Okay.
I got up to Neverland, which is like season 3 or 4. I can't remember.
Because my history with the show is it came out in 2011. I was in college. I did not have cable. I caught the first episode or 2. I know I've seen the pilot, and I know I've seen parts of the episode where they're in the well.
Okay.
Or in the mine or whatever.
My
next door neighbor in college was really into both this and Supernatural. Mm-hmm. And I would just watch because they were on in her room.
Yeah.
They do get stuck in a mine. I think it's like episode 5 of this.
Yes. Okay.
Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah. That's when I started watching, was that episode.
But that's literally like the only episodes I've seen. I've seen the pilot and that before now.
So I started off with the mine episode, and by that I mean like the last 5 minutes of the mine episode. And then I watched up to Neverland. I watched this show unironically because my ex-husband really liked it. And my ex-husband is somebody who appreciates, like, sappy, garbagey, like... And here's the thing. If you like schmaltz, I have nothing against schmaltz. You do you. We're not here necessarily to rip Once Upon a Time a new asshole. We might do that in certain episodes, or whenever Disney likes to, you know, rear in its ugly head and reinforce heteronormative biological family ideals.
I don't hate this show.
I don't hate it either. I just acknowledge it for what it is. What it is trash.
I come not to damn Once Upon a Time, but to speak of Once Upon a Time as a show and its pros and cons. And while it is far from great television, it's actually infinitely watchable.
It is definitely watchable, and
I don't mean that as an insult. There's plenty of TV that's not great, but you can watch it. Like, it's painless to watch an episode or 2 or 3 of Once Upon a Time. I don't hate the show at all. There are parts I quite like about it. There are some jokes that get me, that kind of make me hate myself a little bit.
Yeah,
and there are ones that I don't hate myself, like when Robert Carlyle does anything that makes me laugh.
Which is most of his lines.
Yeah, especially when he's all, like, camping it up as Rumpelstiltskin. He's like, if I may? Gesturing. Yeah, He just does, like, very abrupt and over-the-top gestures.
He
and
knows
I'm, like,
what show
just,
he's in.
I'm just
gesticulating.
Here, and...
Yeah.
Like, he's just a wackadoo, lovable little weirdo.
And him and Regina play... This is interesting to me. I kind of love their dynamic.
There's a thing with him and Regina that I have to point out, but finish your sentence.
Well... It's interesting to me how animated he is in the fairy tale world, and how reserved and cunning he is as Mr. Gold.
Yeah.
And Regina kind of has the opposite, where she's a lot heartless and a lot, obviously there's a lot going for her, and, like, the more you get into the flashbacks, the more fleshed out her character is. Yeah. When she gets over into the real world, she has her Real Housewives without the husband.
She definitely
aesthetic.
has more of a front in the real world.
She is a lot more, and I don't want to say animated, but animated by comparison. Mm-hmm. She's definitely, very businessy, very CEO. Yeah. Like, she has, like, her sterile... corporate fun side.
I could see being afraid of her in the real world.
Yes.
Like, I could see why people would be afraid of her. I don't really get why people are afraid of Mr. Gold yet. But I have a feeling we'll get into it.
Well, that's the thing, though, is from this episode, they make that comment about Mr. Gold owning the town.
Yeah.
So you kind of see that, and in episode 4... is where it really starts to kind of be like, oh, shit. Like, he's not somebody you want to mess with. And episode 4, like, that's as far as I've gotten as far as rewatching it goes, and episode 4 made me laugh the most because of how fucking ridiculous it is.
I've gotten a lot further, but that's because the show is just really watchable. If I'm cooking dinner, or if I'm doing, like, other actual work...
They do cliffhangers right.
I can sit there and put on an episode, and it's a good, like, kind of painless TV experience. I can kind of half pay attention to it sometimes. I rewatch the episodes, though. Like, when we're doing it for the show, I rewatch it as soon as I can before. So, like, the second episode I've seen, like, 3 times. The first 4 episodes I've seen, like, 3 times at this point.
And I've rewatched it, those episodes, but I only rewatched them once. I spent a little bit more time doing my research. So, why don't you talk about Regina and Mr. Gold? And I kind of want to discuss not all of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but I want to specifically talk about the Evil Queen as it is written. So I'll let you go first.
There's just one very minor point that happens in this where Regina is talking to Mr. Gold and she's standing in his way as he's leaving. And he said, could you please, or could you move, or could you get out of my way? And then she doesn't. And then he goes, please. And then he walks
whispers
past her.
Like, really coyly.
So, like, earlier when she said, you won't remember that we made this deal, and he said, well, then you have nothing to lose. It's clear that Mr. Gold remembers some of this. And we don't know how much he knows, but if Robert Carlyle is anything to go by, he knows a lot. And, goddamn him, he's just adorable. Whenever he's in a problem in this series, Dennis just goes, why doesn't he them?
It's great.
He's like, why doesn't he just them? That's how he solved all of his problems in Ravenous.
Which I love that movie.
I've watched that movie so many times since she showed it to
too.
me. Robert Carlyle as a if you want to see him at the top of his game.
Whoa. What a spoiler.
Watch Ravenous. It's worth it.
Just watch Ravenous.
Oh my god.
I might bleep that, actually, when you say if I can figure out a bleep. Yeah.
Robert Carlyle is a Robert Carlyle as a Robert Carlyle as a
Bull.
God, I'm hungry.
Same.
Anyway,
so Regina.
Yes.
Regina has a past.
Yes.
And in this episode, we are reinforced the idea that Snow White ruined her life.
Yeah. And she can't be happy in the world, the fairy tale world, as long as Snow White is still in it, pretty much is what she says. Like, I can't be happy in this world.
And it is mentioned that Regina tried to kill her on the basis that she was prettier than her, which does in fact harken back to the original tale of Snow White. Another kind of important thing to mention here is whenever Regina and Emma have their confrontations with each other, they both at some point say, "You do not know what I am capable of."
Okay.
I bring this up because in the original tale of Snow White, the queen does not try to kill Snow White once, not twice, but 3 separate times. Mm-hmm. The first time she tries killing her by lacing her bodice so tight that she passes out.
As you do.
As you do. The second time by a poisoned comb.
Oh, yeah,
that
that's right.
When you remove the comb, apparently the poison goes away. Thank you, science. And then, poison apple the third time.
Huntsman?
Well,
He was not in the original?
I'm talking about when the king, or when the queen herself goes after her. The huntsman was first, which I'm actually not going to talk about that right now.
No.
I'm going to talk about that later.
Yep.
I'm glad you agree. So, when the queen actually tries to kill Snow White, it takes her 3 separate times to do it, and she almost succeeds. Something important to point out is, yes, her motivation is simply just because this chick's hotter than me. Mm-hmm. There, no other reason other than pure vanity, which goes into another trope, not just about women being terrible mothers or not biologically having kids, being impure or witches or all that other bullshit. But you now have this element of vanity coming into play with the step-parents. And when you were talking about the huntsman trying to kill Snow White, that wasn't added until, I think, one of the first or second revisions of Grimm's stories.
Okay.
So he was actually added a little bit later. And by the time he was, that's whenever he was sent to get her heart and her liver. But originally, it was just the queen abandoning Snow White in the woods, hoping that something would kill her. Which is very reminiscent.
She would be so stupid and helpless in the woods.
Which,
fair.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I might try it once. But this is reminiscent of Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
They tried doing that in that story too, but the difference between Hansel and Gretel and Snow White is that Snow White just cried a lot, and a bunch of short dudes were like, okay, cool, you can, sweep our floor. Yeah, cook and clean, and we're not going to say anything. Mm-hmm. Hansel and Gretel actually, knew how to survive. Mm-hmm.
But
the other thing
Once Upon a Time does is it takes it from a story of pure vanity into Snow White had done something wrong to her.
And at this point, we don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Now, it's important for me to mention that I don't actually remember whether or not this becomes a plot point in Once Upon a Time, so don't actually consider this a spoiler.
Okay.
But in the very first draft of Brothers Grimm's tale, the queen was not her stepmother. The queen was her biological mother, who still envied her daughter that she did all of that stuff to her.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's icky.
Yeah, so, and you still have that same opening, for those of you who don't know, of her pricking her finger and the blood falling onto the snow and wishing for her daughter to be as pure as the snow and with lips and cheeks as ruby and as a blah, 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 blah. And then still ends up hating her daughter for being beautiful that she wished for anyway.
Yeah.
So, whether or not that actually plays in to the writing of Once Upon a Time, I'm not going to say does or not, because I honestly forget. But it is something that I find very curious.
Curious.
Because that's still an example of a biological mother wanting to abandon her daughter, or abandoning her firstborn for various reasons. And that ties into the theme of the show. I'd said this in Heap's pilot, but the writers of this show were talking about how they wanted to make something more hopeful than Lost. In terms of, the show's tone.
Okay.
And Lost was more about redemption. Mm-hmm. But for me, this is sort of like Lost light. Mm-hmm. Because Once Upon a Time just becomes a series of redemption arcs for every single character.
Okay, I can see
over
that.
and over again. So whether or not this whole background, knowing about where Snow White comes from, and knowing how many changes there were from the original story and how it adapted throughout the years, whether that comes into Regina's redemption arc or not, we will have to wait to see for future episodes. But, you know, for right now, it's just sort of interesting how we are taking such a non-reason to want somebody killed into just a mysterious reason. It's not just that she's prettier than me. She ruined my life.
Yeah.
And what
And
that...
I can't be happy.
And I can't be happy unless she's miserable. Not even dead.
Yeah.
Just, I want to take her happiness away from her.
Mm-hmm.
I will not be happy until Snow White has moved to Maine and is forced to teach preschoolers for the rest of her life.
That seems pretty miserable to me.
Yeah.
But she seems to like it. I mean, she's good at it.
Yeah.
I guess.
She's a ditz.
She dresses like a 12-year-old, like, throughout this show.
And believe it or not, there is a reason for that. And in episode 3, Snow White says something as like a throwaway line, but it's actually a callback to the original writing of her character. Mm-hmm. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. How many apples are we giving this episode?
I liked the stuff with Regina. I feel like the stuff with Emma and Henry was kind of spinning its wheels a little bit compared to the first episode. Mm-hmm. So I feel like, I think like 4 or 3.5.
You know what? It's 4 apples with a bite out of one.
Yeah, it's like a little tiny chomp.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was enough good in this episode that I'm interested in seeing how Snow ruined Regina's life. And I want to see how much Mr. Gold knows. And, yeah. Oh, and the one weird line in this.
Which one?
I'm sorry. I forgot almost.
What?
When they're at the cafe, and Henry sends her over a hot chocolate topped with cinnamon.
I forgot about that. Shit.
She's like, not
everybody likes cinnamon.
Not everybody likes chocolate with cinnamon. And I'm sitting there drinking a Mexican hot chocolate, watching this, and I'm like, not everybody likes cinnamon and chocolate?
Because cinnamon is too spicy for my chocolate. Also, did you know that liking cinnamon with your hot chocolate is genetic?
I'm just straight up making horchata when I get home.
Like I said, cinnamon with your hot chocolate is genetic. And the show wants us to buy it.
I'm not buying it. I don't know if my mom likes cinnamon and hot chocolate. I'm gonna have to call my mom right now.
You know what, though? If our mothers say that they don't like cinnamon with their hot chocolate, that means we're adopted. And we're going to have to kill our mothers because we're not allowed to have stepmothers.
They're definitely evil queens.
My mom is absolutely an evil queen.
But,
and you may quote me on that.
But before I call my mom, would you mind loosening my bodice and this comb? I started feeling sick ever since you gave it to me.
You know what? You just need it tighter. Just a little bit tighter. That's it.
Just
here, but push the comb in a little bit more.
If I push it in more, you think it'll hurt less?
Yeah, and you know what? Try my apple pie.
Oh, yeah, that sounds really good. Thank you.
Okay.
Because bitches be vain.
I am. So, I think that's it for this episode. Boy howdy doody, this next one is going to be a fun one to tackle because it's subversive and feminist.
Woo!
Alright, I'm Sam Logston.
I'm Amanda Pierce.
And remember, it might not be the end.
It might not be happy.
But you're always welcome to this party. Take care, folks.
Party!